You could get killed chasing after your damn fortune and glory.
Maybe. But not today.
So the next movie was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and this is technically a prequel.
Yes, in a weird sort of structure for the trilogy.
Because Raiders takes place in 1936, and this one takes place in 1935, which that does make this the first prequel done by George Lucas.
Oh, yeah.
A much better one. Okay, the reason why it's a prequel, though, that's kind of it was a strange deal that they did there. Was the reason they said it before Raiders was because they didn't want Nazis to be the villains again.
Huh.
So I guess this is what Indiana Jones was like before Raiders, and his character is a little bit different in this one. He's more cynical in this one, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, overall, the one thing that is definitely talked about this movie is it does feel darker.
It definitely is, yeah.
Overall.
Part of that is because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, I think they were going through breakups at the time.
Yeah, I know George Lucas was going through a divorce.
And you can kind of see that while watching it. And Spielberg himself, he's like not a huge fan of this movie, which I'm like, come on, dude, it's pretty good. I guess if he has bad memories from, how he was feeling at the time, I can't blame it. But yeah, this movie was released on May 23rd, 1984. It cost $28.17 million, which that's actually more than the first one cost. It made $333.1 million, so not quite as much as the first one, but still pretty good.
It's still an impressive return.
It was the third highest grossing film of 1984. Ghostbusters was second.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then first was Beverly Hills Cop.
Huh.
That's how huge Eddie Murphy was at the time. Once again, you got Spielberg in the director's chair. Which one thing they were thinking about was they were thinking of having a different director, but George really wanted Spielberg to come back for this one. And something I realized is that aside from the Indiana Jones movies, Spielberg doesn't tend to do sequels.
Yeah.
I think the only other one he did was Lost World Jurassic Park.
Huh.
Because apparently he doesn't enjoy doing sequels, but... the cast, of course, Harrison Ford came back.
Yep.
Gotta have him back. He's Indiana fucking Jones. Pat Roach is also back. He gets more fight scenes with Harrison Ford.
Seems like it's all he does.
That's basically what he does in these movies. Kate
Oh.
Capshaw. Sorry, what'd you say?
I just read a cameo that I did not know was in this movie.
Oh, well, we'll be getting to that. You didn't notice that, really?
I didn't.
That's amazing to me. But Kate Capshaw, she is in it as Willie, and interestingly, she ended up marrying Spielberg.
Yep.
And whenever he's asked about the movie, he always says, that's the one good thing he got out of that experience making this movie. Ke Huy Quan, I don't know how it's pronounced, but he plays Short Round in this. And he's also in The Goonies.
And then I know recently he was in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. Apparently he retired from acting for a while. But then he came back to do that movie, so I'm like, holy shit, Short Round came back, I haven't seen that movie, but I've heard it's fucking weird.
I really want to watch it.
I do too, yeah. Maybe we should just do that on the podcast.
I would love to, after Indiana Jones, just do Everything Everywhere All at Once.
So that's what these movies are, basically. Philip Stone, which you probably don't recognize the name, but he played Delbert Grady in The Shining.
Oh.
He's the guy that, he talks to in the bathroom. He's the previous owner of the hotel, but he's, saying, You were always the caretaker here, Jack.
Oh, okay, that guy.
And he's also Alex's dad in A Clockwork Orange, so he's in a couple of Stanley Kubrick movies.
Huh.
And there's also quite a few Bollywood actors in this, including the main villain, the guy who played Mala Ram. He ended up getting typecast as a villain in Bollywood movies thanks to this film.
He apparently holds the most Filmfare Awards for Best Villain nominations.
Yeah, he was super popular as a Bollywood villain. There's like, when I was watching Bollywood movies a few years ago, I went out of my way to find ones that like Mala Ram was in because I was curious. There was one he's in called Tahalka where he plays the villain and his character's name is General Dong. And he has a catchphrase that translates to "Dong is never wrong." And guess what? He actually has a song in it.
That's awesome.
And it's one of my favorite Bollywood songs. It's so good. He also cuts someone's head off in it, too. He's a pretty good villain in that movie. Lawrence Kasdan did not return to write this movie because apparently he didn't like that they were going a darker direction.
Huh.
So Gloria Katz and Willard Hayek wrote this. Before this, they had written American Graffiti, another George Lucas movie. And they later wrote Howard the Duck.
Oh no.
And a movie that's even worse, Radioland Murders.
Oh no.
God. At least Howard the Duck is weird. So I'll give it that. It has more entertainment value than that movie. Radioland Murders.
It looks like they also worked on Messiah of Evil together.
And one thing that I should point out is that, unlike Star Wars, George Lucas did not have sequels planned out for Indiana Jones. Hell, I'd argue he didn't have a plan for Star Wars either. Because, I mean, come on, there's so many inconsistencies as you go along. Now, there were several ideas they were throwing around before they settled on India as the setting. Originally, they wanted to do Indiana Jones and the Monkey King.
Okay.
And they wanted to have a motorcycle chase on top of the Great Wall of China, but China wouldn't let them film there. Although this apparently didn't stop Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life from doing a motorcycle scene on the Great Wall of China about 20 years later, so... Oh well. Lucas also wanted to do one in a haunted castle in Scotland.
Huh.
But Spielberg had just done Poltergeist, so he vetoed that idea. Indiana Jones discovering dinosaurs was another idea Lucas had, but I guess Spielberg didn't feel like making Jurassic Park 10 years early, so...
That feels like an Indiana Jones 4 kind of plot there.
It really does. Hell, maybe they'll do that in the fifth one. But eventually they decided on having it set in India with child slavery and cult sacrifices. And the original title was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Death.
Temple of Doom's better title, I think.
It is, yeah. So, a few years ago, when I was on Netflix, I noticed that the Indiana Jones movies were on there. And the plot summaries they had on there were... interesting.
Okay.
The one for Temple of Doom said... They went looking for a sacred stone. They found a vicious pagan cult. Things went downhill from there.
Who wrote that? I mean, technically, yes, but...
There was a point where, like, the Netflix summaries for some of these movies were just so fucking ridiculous. And they get more ridiculous once we get to the next two movies, but... Okay, so... Now, this one I was not allowed to watch for a while because of the darker elements, obviously. Although, again, I knew what happened in this movie anyway, because I'd read the novelizations for all these movies before actually seeing them. And I'd also played the Lego Indiana Jones video game. Which, honestly, watching these movies again, I was kind of like, I kind of want to play that game again, actually.
I know.
Because those games were fun, you know? Some people aren't huge fans of this. I actually really enjoy this movie. I've always really liked this movie. I've always felt like this one's kind of the unloved middle child of the trilogy.
It's definitely darker, but it's still great.
I feel like I'm glad you like it. Actually, that was one thing I was worried going in, because I remember one time. This is a long time ago. I remember talking to you one time, and you said you didn't like Temple of Doom.
My stance on that has definitely changed, especially just watching it again recently.
Because I always feel bad for this movie when people bash it. Like I can kind of some of it I can kind of see why, but. Because honestly, I actually think of the 4 movies, this one succeeds the most at capturing the feel of a film, like adventure film from the 30s or 40s. And the action scenes in this movie are fucking crazy, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
Like, I think people are too hard on this one just because it's not Raiders of the Lost Ark. Well, guess what?
It's almost impossible to be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
99% of movies aren't as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. There have been like only 2 movies we've done on this podcast that have been better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'll just say that right now. That being said, I don't think this is as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I don't think the plot is as strong. I don't think the characters are as good. But I love this movie just because of how bizarre it is.
Yeah.
It went in such a different direction, but it still has that adventure serial style. I feel like Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they kind of lost that adventure serial style a bit for me, and they instead seem more focused on giving Indiana Jones more family members. You know? And they weren't as insane and gritty as the first 2 movies were. Because Raiders of the Lost Ark, I mean, people like complain about Temple of Doom being dark, but Raiders of the Lost Ark has a guy's face melting off. For fuck's sake.
It still astounds me that that's just the most graphic that they got was in the first one, and they just knocked that out of the park.
And I like that this one took risks. One thing this movie's definitely grown in appreciation for me, because I've realized you would never see a big studio make a movie like this ever again.
No.
For better and for worse. In a time where sequels and prequels just are not taking risks, this movie is very refreshing for me. It is such a unique, visceral experience. And did you have anything to add? Sorry, I get a little long-winded sometimes.
So I guess in terms of initial thoughts, it does feel pretty different from Raiders of the Lost Ark at quite a few points, especially with just, you know, like you said, just how weird some things get. Like I think a great example is that dinner scene, which, you know, everybody knows, for the chilled monkey brains.
I love that scene. I know a lot of people hate it because it's so gross, but I fucking love it. They're like eating chilled monkey brains, and like there's like eels coming out of a snake, and like a dead snake, obviously. It was a fake snake. They didn't kill a real snake for the movie.
Yeah, and
there's like a soup with eyeballs in it, like. Oh my god!
There's just lots of bugs everywhere.
Oh yeah, they're eating like beetles too, and there's one scene in this movie. I bet people that hate insects, they can't watch that scene, like, because it is so gross, like just all the bugs and stuff.
And I'll also say it has it has my favorite intro out of all 4 Indiana Jones movies.
This is your oh my god. It's a toss-up for me between this and the opening of Raiders, because they're both perfect openings.
Yeah.
I think, as far as action scenes go, I think Temple of Doom has probably the best action scenes.
Yeah.
of the series, like especially the minecart chase towards the end. That part
Yes.
is ridiculous. Like it's so intense, and it looks real too. Like they use miniatures, but it looks like they're actually going through there. It's a very impressive scene. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you like this movie though. I'm relieved at that, because most of the people I know, they don't like this movie. Like they're like, it's too gross, it's too creepy. Like I had like an aunt who was just like, oh, like that the villain in that, he's like creepy, he's like ripping people's hearts out and stuff. Like it's just,
Yeah, I can see why it would turn some people off just because of the direction it took, but it's still able to keep kind of that fun energy that the first one had.
it's a funnier movie than you would expect considering
Yeah.
there's a lot of really funny lines. We can start getting into like again, positives and negatives. We'll talk about the positives for right now.
So I think I would like to start again just with the intro
Yes. Oh my
to this
god.
movie because it is so good.
I love the opening to this movie so much. Like this movie kind of got me obsessed with the song Anything Goes for a little bit. Like that song, there's like a song and dance number at the beginning. It's like in Shanghai, and they're in like a nightclub, the Obi-Wan nightclub.
Club Obi-Wan.
Yeah, obvious Star Wars reference. That song and dance number, it's really well choreographed. It's actually really impressive.
Yeah.
And basically, they only put that in there because Spielberg had always wanted to do a musical. So they're like, they wanted like a Busby Berkeley type, like, opening, like fucking 42nd Street, you know? Something like that. Willie shows up, and that dress she's wearing was actually made out of real, like, material from, like, the 20s and 30s, I should point out.
Oh, really?
A very iconic dress, too. And she's singing Anything Goes in Mandarin, which I know some people, they're, like, thinking, like, this is a super dark movie, but it's got this really jolly song number at the beginning. I honestly think it fits perfectly.
It does.
Because the song is called Anything Goes, and that's what this movie is. It's just, it's like they shoved every insane idea they could think of into one movie, and I kind of love it for that.
And I know that last time we talked about how the intros are a bit James Bondy. This one especially. This one feels like it's an entirely different movie than what comes after.
He's dressed the same way James Bond is dressed in the opening of Goldfinger.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake. I mean, he's wearing the same, like, white tuxedo with the red lapel, you know. It's also how Rick Blaine from Casablanca was dressed, too. And it's so good. Lao Che, he is such a memorable villain, and he's only in it for, like, 5 minutes, but he's so good.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the actor that plays him, but he's really good. I just love the scene with him. He, like, poisons, Indiana Jones, and like says, oh, like, here's the antidote. For what? The poison you just drank, Dr. Jones. It's so good. He kills a guy with a shish kebab.
That's my favorite part of this fight scene. While Indy's like, it looks like Indy's having like a heart attack. He falls all over to a cart that has a flaming shish kebab. He picks it up and just throws it at a guy, and it sticks right in his chest.
It's scenes like that make me wonder, why do people hate this movie so much? Because this whole opening is just, it's one of the best action scenes in the entire series. Like, I like the part where he's running behind they knock the big gong off of the wall, and he's like rolling away, and he's like hiding behind it to like shield himself from the bullets. That part's pretty great. It's such a fun opening. Every time I watch this movie, that opening just excites me so much. Like, it's so good that sometimes I wonder, like, maybe this is my favorite Indiana Jones movie, because it kicks it off, like, just so well.
It's got such a good energy in that scene.
I love everything that happens in that opening. It's like, and it really does feel like a James Bond opening. It really does. He's being chased by, like, Chinese gangsters, like, in a car, too. Oh yeah, and then they get to the plane, and this is where, yep, the cameo.
Dan Aykroyd.
You didn't know Dan Aykroyd was in this movie?
I didn't know Dan Aykroyd until I looked at the cast just right now.
This is the same year Ghostbusters came out too, I should point out.
Oh, really? That
He's
makes
in, like,
sense.
2 of the top 3 highest grossing movies of that year. It's so obvious that it's Dan Aykroyd, though, because it sounds like him. It's the same mannerisms. I guess he is a little bit far away.
Yeah, I just didn't put it together.
I guess he is doing an accent, so, like, but still, I mean, I could always tell. What's next is Bill Murray in the next one. And he leads him to the plane. I love how Indiana Jones, he gets this, like, just shit-eating grin on his face as he's, like, getting on the plane. He, like, says, "Nice try, Lao Che."
Hey, Lao Che, and he closes the door,
like,
and it's Lao Che's plane.
Yeah, like, Lao Che, like, he closes the door, yeah. And Lao Che's just laughing his ass off. Like, that part is just... It's so good. And they're, like, on the plane, but then the pilots, like, they jump out and basically strand him, which... That's sort of like what happens in Moonraker, actually. I just realized, but not quite the same way, because they don't have a fight in midair like in that movie, but... But the way they get out, they decide, hey, let's just jump out with a raft.
Well, Indy has...
Because there's no parachutes. There's no parachutes, so they can't use parachutes.
While they're still in the plane, there's a pretty good line.
You know how to fly, don't you?
No, do you?
It's so good, yeah. And there's even a callback to it in the next movie, too, which is pretty funny. But yeah, I love that part so much. It is pretty ridiculous how they escape with, like, the raft and stuff, but, I mean, it's an Indiana Jones movie, for fuck's sake. I mean, all of them are unrealistic. How does he hang on to a submarine while it's submerged in Raiders of the Lost Ark? I mean, you know, but anyway. Just, like, the raft, like, it falls out of the plane onto, like, a cliff, and then it slides down the cliff, and then falls again into, like, like, down a waterfall, and then into some rapids, like, which... And I've been rafting before, too. It is not fun, you know. It wasn't quite like this, though, obviously. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but the ending on the bridge...
The bridge scene is great.
Where he's, like, got the machete. He's like, prepare to meet Kali.
In hell.
Cuts it, you know, just like... He's the rocks, like, burning him and stuff. There's alligators below. Oh my god, it's so good. If you watch... I think, like, people who watch this, they put a little bit too much thought into it, because these aren't those types of movies. These are... this is supposed to be escapism, you know? And I think it's perfect as escapist entertainment, you know? Because there's so many great action scenes in this.
And then pretty soon after our opening action scene, we get introduced to this movie's MacGuffin.
Yeah, the Shankara stones. Because he goes to, like, a village. This is where they also realize they're in India.
Yeah.
I also like how Willie, like, she doesn't want to eat the food that they were given. And he's like, Jones says, you're embarrassing me. Just eat it.
Yeah, and he's like, you're insulting them and you're embarrassing me.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, that's a great Harrison Ford line. I also will say the music, once again, I think the music of this is great.
Oh, yeah.
John Williams, he knocks it out of the park. Because, again, it has that adventure, like action-packed adventure tone, but also there's, like, an eeriness to it, which definitely suits the movie.
Yeah.
Because of... Well, we'll get to some of that.
And then, while they're in this village, the village elder ends up giving the exposition about the Sankara stones, and I love his performance, especially knowing how it was done.
Yeah, he basically learned the lines phonetically, if I remember right.
Yeah, because he had, like, an earpiece in it, so Spielberg was, like, feeding him his lines.
Basically, he didn't understand English, so they had to... Yeah. And one thing that's funny, actually, is, like, the original cut of this movie, when they watched it, Spielberg was like, Spielberg and Lucas, they, like, looked at each other and went, okay, this is too fast. Because, like, I read somewhere, like, the original cut of the movie, it was so fast that they decided to edit it to slow things down a little.
Wow.
And the beginning of the movie is a little bit slow to get going, like, because there's the expedition and stuff, but once it gets going, it is a fucking roller coaster ride. It is insane, because you got, like, I forgot while watching this movie just how intense the ending in this movie is, because you got, like, so many back-to-back action scenes. Because that bridge scene directly follows the minecart chase.
That's right.
Watching this, I was thinking, I would love to see this in a theater sometime, because I bet it would be so exciting to, like, watch, you know?
Yeah.
But I feel like some people forget, like, at least I think it is. I think it's a really funny movie, too.
Yeah.
Like, it has moments where, this is again what I was talking about when I said it felt like kind of a 30s movie. It kind of feels like a screwball comedy.
Especially once you get to that the dinner scene at Bangkok Palace.
The dinner scene, but also there's a part where that campfire scene where
oh yeah.
Indiana Jones and Short Round, they're like playing cards. And Willie's just running around getting scared of everything. Like, she like goes over to, she's like so scared, and they're just playing cards. They're barely even paying attention to her. Although I think Indy, he like makes a comment saying like,
The trouble with her is the noise.
and then she says, "We're surrounded. This place is crawling with living things." And then Indy says, "That's why they call it the jungle, sweetheart." Which, that's one problem some people have with this movie, is Indy's companions, Short Round and Willie. I'll admit they aren't the strongest characters, but personally, I like the dynamic they have.
It's interesting, and I'm glad that it's different than what we got in the first movie.
That's why I like it. I'm glad that it was different. Like, and they're such an unusual group of characters to put together.
Yeah.
Because you got Indiana Jones, who's an archaeologist and also a college professor. You got Willie, who's like a nightclub singer. And you got Short Round, who's like this Vietnamese kid that he found on the street picking his pocket. Like, just... And you just throw these three together and you're just like, what the fuck? It's just...
It is a very strange group.
I think it leads to some really funny scenes, honestly. Like, there's a lot of really funny scenes. Like, one of my favorites is when they're down in that room with, like, the spikes coming down.
Oh, yeah.
Short Round and Indy, they're, like, down, like... down there, and, like... Willie, like, runs down. She says she, like, sees these two, like, corpses down there, like, outside where Indy and Short Round are. And she yells, "There are 2 dead people down here." And then Indy says, "There are going to be 2 dead people in here." And just that whole interaction between them where he's, like, trying to get her to, like, turn the, like, spikes off so that they survive, you know, but there's, like, bugs everywhere.
And you can't get to it. Yeah.
Just the chemistry between these characters, I find so funny, in this movie. There's, like, one part where it's one of those lines that, like, it doesn't really mean much, like, on paper, but the way Harrison Ford delivers it is just so funny. Where he's like pleading with her, and he says, "We are going to die." The way he says
it gets close too, because it starts to fold his hat. He gets down low enough.
It's so funny, and also really intense at the same time too. A lot of people don't like Willie and Short Round. I can understand people not liking Willie. I mean, fine, she's annoying. She's meant to be annoying, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and even Short Round and Indy don't like her. Why do people hate Short Round so much?
I think there is some backlash because he is a bit of a caricature, I would say.
Like an Asian stereotype or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like, I'm a person, I don't even like kids, and even I like Short Round. I mean, he's like a legitimate badass in this. He's like kicking, like doing martial arts and stuff. He actually saves Indiana Jones several times. And he has good chemistry with Harrison Ford. I don't know. I like Short Round, I'll admit. Yeah. But yeah, again, they did something different. You know, they didn't just go,
Yeah.
let's just pair Indiana Jones up with a former, like, with an ex, I guess. But yeah. I love Mola Ram in this movie. He is such a fun villain in this. Because I like that he's so different from the other Indiana Jones villains.
He is. He's not entirely worried about world conquest in the name of the Nazis.
He's worried about world conquest in the name of the Tuggies. But
Yeah.
yeah. And I just love how insane this dude is. Like, just he's so demented. He seems to just be
sacrifices people, rips out their hearts. He's wearing like ram horns on his head.
His costume is so good. It also has a shrunken head on it too.
That's right.
He's even willing to kill people on his own side. That's how evil this dude is. He's like a child slaver. Oh my god, he's just... I mentioned earlier that none of the other main villains from the Indiana Jones movies were ever as good as Belloc, but Mola Ram comes pretty close, I think.
Mola Ram is... I like Mola Ram because he's unique. He's not just like some bureaucrat bowing down to a government.
Exactly, yeah. He's just... He has his own cult, and he's gonna, like... He's doing his own little thing underground. It's so good. Oh my god. He's like legitimately creepy, but it's also just like he looks like he's having so much fun too. He's kind of like Palpatine a little bit. Where it just seems like this dude takes so much delight in being
evil.
Completely insane and evil, and it's just hard to hate this dude as a result.
Is that the third time George Lucas has made a Palpatine? There's Palpatine, there's the Witch in Willow.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Mola Ram's definitely better than the Witch and Willow, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He's a much more... Even, I mean, if you don't like this movie that much, I mean, Mola Ram's a very memorable villain. If not just for the costume, I mean... And there's, like, voodoo and shit in this movie. Like, people getting their hearts ripped out.
And, okay, well, not only does this guy get his heart ripped out, but he's lowered into, like, a swirling... Like, it's not just lava, it's, like, swirling around like a hell portal.
It's so good, yeah. The set design in this movie, we have to mention the set design. It's, like, all the temples and stuff. Like, the actual Temple of Doom... It looks like a fucking Temple of Doom. There's, like, lava.
It does.
There's skulls everywhere. You see the, like, stones, like, there, and, like... I like how they got, like, the stones, like... One of them's in each eye, and then one's in, like, the mouth of, like, this giant skull thing. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And the poster of this movie's... I know we didn't really talk about the poster of the first one, but I love the poster of this movie.
Yeah.
It's a very memorable... poster, really either of them, whether it's Indiana Jones with the machete or like the one where you got like it shows Mola Ram and like the temple and stuff, and this movie actually has one of my favorite movie taglines of all time.
Yeah.
Which is if adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones.
That is pretty good.
You're goddamn right it means Indiana Jones. I mean, and I actually had a shirt with the poster for this movie on it. I used to, at least.
You know what's a fun little callback to the first movie?
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
When Indy gets jumped by two men who are flashily waving around swords, and he doesn't have a gun.
But since this is a prequel, that means that happened before. So I guess that meant,
Yep.
oh,
He learned from this experience and knew he had to take a gun the next time.
yeah. There's also kind of a Star Wars callback where he, like, runs, like, screaming at some, like,
Oh, yeah.
guys, but then he sees how many of them there are and then runs away, sort of like Han Solo in Star Wars, you know.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford, he spends a lot of this movie shirtless, too, which...
Yeah, especially when he's possessed.
You know, maybe
Or
that's why I
brainwashed,
like
whatever.
it so much, now I think about it. I like the design of the Shankara stones, too.
Yeah.
I'll admit, they're not as good of a MacGuffin as the Ark of the Covenant. I will admit that. But they're interesting, I think. They're kind of just the thing, like, okay,
He's got to go find something.
you gotta find something. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's called MacGuffin. But yeah, I like the part where Short Round, like, asks India what Shankara stones, like, means, and he says, "Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory." Which kind of shows he's kind of a different character from how he is in Raiders.
Yeah, there's not really any, like, Professor Jones moment in this.
He's more... He kind of wants to, like... he gets called Dr. Jones a lot. But yeah, he, like... But in this one, it seems like he wants, like... He really wants the artifact to, like, put in a museum. You know, he doesn't understand, like, the power it has. Yeah, I guess he kind of... Alright, the Ark of the Covenant, I guess he kind of goes through that. He kind of goes through the same character arc in these three movies. Sort of. Not quite the same. Well, at least the first two, anyway, but yeah. I also like how Willie, like, she thinks she sees a bunch of birds. But it turns out that Indy, like, says, they're not birds, sweetheart. They're giant vampire bats. Which, of course, later she gets Starlord. And I just love how, like, Willie's just getting, like, basically getting shit on the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, even the elephants don't like her. They're, like, spraying her with water and stuff. Like, so, like, I mean, yeah, she is an annoying character, but she's supposed to be annoying.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they're trying to, you know, do the whole, like, damsel in distress trope, kind of like movies from, like, the 30s and 40s. Sort of, which, yeah, it's a bit of a dated trope, but I don't know. I think for this type of movie, I think it's fine. I also like the part where she thinks a snake is an elephant trunk.
Oh, yeah, and she grabs it and throws it on the ground.
And Indy is just really startled by it.
Actually, I heard something. I think this was in the bonus features of either the DVD or Blu-ray collection that I have. But apparently the crew kept playing pranks on the actress. And so when they got that, she thought it was a rubber snake that someone was dangling over her. And so when she said, "Would you knock it off?" she was actually talking to the crew, and she didn't know it was a real snake that she just grabbed and threw.
So oh, that's funny. It's a pretty funny scene, too, I think.
Yeah.
This is a very violent movie. That's another thing we should... But at one point, they, like, find a statue that has cut off fingers on it. I don't know if you noticed this. And that dinner scene, like, just...
The dinner scene is great. They're
I
bringing
feel
out
like
these,
what
like...
happened is Steven Spielberg saw Octopussy and then decided, I'm going to have an even more disgusting dinner scene than the one in that movie. Because in that movie, it's like a lamb head, and he's, like, eating the eyeballs of it. It's so gross. And then in this one, it's like... You got the monkey brains, you got the snake, there's the eels, and snake surprise! As that one guy calls it.
Chilled monkey brains!
Chilled monkey brains, yeah, there are some ethnic stereotypes in this scene. We should point that out. I'm trying to remember the eyeball soup.
Yeah.
Is that it? Oh yeah, the Beatles with
Yep.
It's so gross, but it actually, I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of gross out humor, but I actually think that scene works for what
it was pretty funny.
It's just the tension in it is funny. It was also a good way to do the exposition.
Yes. Because you have Indy talking to... I don't remember what his role is, but he's one of the higher-ups at the palace.
Captain Blumbert, or was it Colonel Blumbert? And Chatterlall, the Prime Minister.
Yeah, it was Captain Blumbert.
Which apparently Pangot Palace is the same set as Kamal Khan's palace from Octopussy. So...
Really?
Which lends even more to my theory that Spielberg saw Octopussy and decided to do a similar thing. And the fact they're both set in India, too.
Yeah.
The Pangot Palace set's pretty nice, too, I should point out. I also noticed this one has a lot more sexual tension in this one.
Yeah. Especially the scene where Indy and Willie...
So he's like having an argument with Willie.
Yep.
And they basically just both storm off to their rooms and like...
And then someone tries to kill Indy and he's strangling him.
He basically gets cock blocked by the guy. Like he's like strangling him, and then he kills him by hanging him from a ceiling fan with his whip, which that's a pretty good kill right there. I also like the matte paintings in this too. Like there's this one particular cave shot that's like a really good matte painting.
Oh, that is a pretty good matte painting.
I was also noticing the music during the cult scenes kind of sounded like Duel of the Fates a little bit.
In a few spots it does.
This is before Duel of the Fates, obviously.
Yeah.
And you even hear like a lightsaber sound effect when they open up the lava pit.
That's right, I forgot about that.
He gets like startled by a snake statue at one point, which I think that's pretty funny. I like the design of the blood of the cup that has the blood of Kali in it. I think it looks pretty cool.
That Kali statue that they have in the temple is also really good.
That one thing we should point out, though, is that this is not an accurate, like, Hinduism. This is not.
No.
And Indiana Jones acting evil is very fascinating, too. Because he, like, drinks the blood and then basically just, like, gets possessed.
Yeah, he acts like a zombie, basically.
He's, like, acting like a dick, and, like, Willie doesn't know that he's, like, possessed, and he, like, puts her in that cage thing and, like, lowers her down, basically.
Yeah.
He slaps Short Round at one point, which, like... yeah. I like how Short Round, he, like, figures out that, like, you need, like, fire to, like...
cleanse the person, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And he, like, right before he, like, hits him with the torch, he says, Indy, I love you. And then, like, snaps him out of it, and you get a pretty good fight scene right here where they're just kicking ass. Again, why do people hate Short Round so much? Jesus. And the way Balaram escapes is pretty funny, too.
Yeah.
There's, like, an escape hatch below the statue, and he just, like, laughs maniacally before going down it. I think Indiana Jones, like, had a spear that he was trying to use on him or something like that. There's a pretty good fight scene between him and Pat Roach. And, like, the Maharaja...
I'm trying to remember who Roach played in this one.
He's the big...
Oh, the big guy with the turban.
He's the slave driver, yeah. He's wearing, like, blackface.
Yeah. That's always in style, apparently.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, this movie, that is one thing we should point out about this movie. It is a little bit racist.
But it's a very satisfying fight scene, especially with how it ends.
I like how I also like that he tries to save the guy before he gets steamrolled.
Yeah.
To, like, because he, like, gets crushed by this thing, and he's, like, trying to pull him up, and, yeah, it's just... And there's a lot of blood on the, thing, too. Like
on the roller.
Yeah, oh, man. Another thing about this movie, he lost his gun pretty early in it, so he has to use like other methods to like escape, which I think is pretty cool. And there's like the Maharaja was like using voodoo on him. He has this Indiana Jones
the voodoo doll. He keeps like sticking it in his back, and Indy's like falling over in pain.
He's trying to fight this guy while oh my god. We can get into the negatives a little bit if you want. I guess we've kind of mentioned them. This movie is kind of racist.
A little bit.
It's not a very accurate or flattering depiction of India.
No.
It's certainly not an accurate depiction of Hinduism. Although, to be fair, it is like this underground cult, so they're not meant to like...
They're not meant to represent the whole of the religion.
But still, yeah. But apparently it was offensive enough that the Indian government didn't want them filming in India.
Really?
So they ended up shooting in Sri Lanka, which is close enough to India. And apparently to get the snakes into Sri Lanka, they booked them under fake names in hotel rooms.
Really? Which
is how, and some, like, an example was Mr. and Mrs. Longfellow. Another thing about this movie, the villain doesn't show up until, like, halfway into it.
Yeah, and then even after that, he, like, sacrifices a dude, disappears for a while, and comes back for the final fight.
It does say a lot, though, about how memorable he is, that he, he doesn't have a ton of screen time, but everybody remembers what this dude looks like. I mean...
And then
the heart-ripping scene. How can you forget the heart-ripping scene? I mean, that's, like, one of the, like, most memorable scenes from the Indiana Jones movies, and that's also where the famous quote, Kali Ma, comes from, which I've referenced before on the podcast when we were talking about Last Blood and the heart-ripping scene in that movie. I think there's a better heart-ripping scene in this movie, though, especially since this is a PG movie. How the fuck did they get that into a PG movie? That's insane.
And that something else that you pointed out earlier was that they felt like the pacing was too fast at first, and so they slowed it down.
The exposition does slow it down in the beginning.
Yeah, I will say I don't really enjoy the pacing of this one quite as much, just since the beginning does kind of get a little bogged down. Like once we're past the intro scene.
That is a problem with basically every Indiana Jones movie after Raiders, is they kind of get a little expository.
Yeah.
And the plot's not as good. The stakes were a lot higher in Raiders. And one thing I hadn't realized until rewatching it this time, they basically stay in one location the whole movie.
Yeah.
Aside from like the opening in Shanghai, they're basically in India the whole time, whereas you look at the other movies, he's traveling all over the place.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like Indiana Jones more as a globetrotter, but I don't know. I mean, India was a good choice of location. And I mentioned before, Spielberg was not a fan of this movie. And he made it, so, I mean, he thought it was too dark and that it out-poltered Poltergeist.
Really?
Which Poltergeist has some pretty fucked up scenes in it. That was another movie. That's one thing we need to point out. This movie basically invented the PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
It's because of this movie because people like took their kids to see this and they were horrified. Because there's some pretty fucked up stuff that happens in it. So they're like, okay, it's not quite violent enough to be rated R, but it's definitely not PG, so PG-13. And that's how PG-13 came to exist. And I find it funny that the two Indiana Jones movies that aren't PG are the least violent ones. And Spielberg later said the reason he was fated to make this movie was because he met his wife, Kate Capshaw, on it. Honestly, though, Spielberg, I wish you did more crazy shit like this.
It is very entertaining when it hits its stride.
The only time after this that I can remember Spielberg doing something dark and weird like this, like after this movie, was that War of the Worlds movie he did. George Lucas, his view of it was a little more positive. He said part of why the movie took on a darker tone is because he was going through a divorce at the time, like we mentioned earlier. Here's a quote. "I love the movie. It's just slightly darker in tone and not as fun as the first." It seems like Harrison Ford liked it, too. He said, "I was fairly well pleased with the final result. It certainly was a darker kind of story, but well worth it for the originality of that film. Compared to what I think expectations were for it, it was a little bit more challenging, I think, than what people were anticipating." I guess we can do our final thoughts here real quick if you want. Because I basically went through my notes.
Yeah, so I guess just for me, on my final thoughts is, it's fun. It's not quite up to the same level that Raiders was, but again, that's almost impossible to do. It is darker in tone, but that doesn't take away from the fun that the movie has. It's got a lot of great action pieces. That intro is definitely my favorite intro out of the whole series. The music scores, once again, just classic.
It's such a hard pick between like the opening of Raiders and the opening of the, because Raiders, that opening where he's like in the jungle and stuff, there's like the arrows shooting at him and there's the boulder. But Temple of Doom, yes, they're neck and neck for my like favorite opening from these movies, because I don't think the openings for the next two movies were as good.
Yeah, not quite.
But yeah, I'm gonna be totally honest. The last few times I've watched this, I didn't used to be like this, but the last few times I've watched this, I've actually enjoyed it slightly more than Last Crusade. I know that's gonna surprise a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think part of it is just I saw Last Crusade so many times that I basically know every line of it. Whereas Temple of Doom, it's more fresh for me because I didn't see it until a little bit later. I hesitate to say which one I prefer, though, because I think they're both great. And because they're so completely different from each other. Although I will say Last Crusade is a more quotable movie than this.
Yeah.
But Temple of Doom, I think, has better action scenes. In fact, of the series, this might be the best when it comes to the action. It's just, whether it's the minecart chase, the bridge scene. I love the bridge scene. You betrayed Shiva. And the stones, like, burn his hands, and he falls into the Mulram. He, like, falls and gets killed by alligators. It's so good.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford, he is just so badass and charismatic in this movie. Well, this might be the one where he's the most badass, actually.
Yeah.
Like, he's in, like, the best shape of his life here in this movie. But, again, I don't like it quite as much as Raiders, but that is, again, to be fair,
it's hard to be better than Raiders.
There's tons of movies that I don't like as much as Raiders, because Raiders is like one of my favorite movies of all time. But Temple of Doom, I would also say, is definitely a favorite of mine. I love it. It's fun. It's crazy. It's weird. It was just such a weird point in time, and just for them to just go, okay, let's like try to do like, let's see what we can get away with in this movie, and like, just again, you're never, for better or for worse, you're never gonna see a movie like this done by a big studio. That was a lot of fun, actually. I'm glad we decided to do these.
So am I. It's nice watching a good movie after Turks in Space.
Yes, yeah. I'm glad you like this movie more than Turks in Space. I do too, to be fair. If it isn't obvious, I don't really have much positive to say about Turks in Space. Hell, the pacing of this movie kind of feels like Turkish Star Wars at some points. Like, it reaches a point where it just goes off the rails and, like, just... I've heard some people have compared it to, like, a theme park ride.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can definitely see that. Again, at some point, I would love to see the original Indiana Jones movies on, like, a big screen, because that would be so much fun. This one especially, like, again, like, this was probably the most exciting and intense of the series.
I think I'd agree with that. It feels like the stakes are a bit higher in this one than in the later ones, for sure.
It's grittier.
Yeah.
I think. Like, like I mentioned, there was like a grittiness that the first two Indiana Jones movies had that, like, the later ones didn't quite have, especially the fourth one. I mean, but again,
yeah,
we'll get to that. But yeah, I love it. You know, just there's some people that don't, but I don't care. I don't give a fuck. You know, I love seeing people get their hearts ripped out. Okay. So yeah, next time we will be doing Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which...
my favorite Indiana Jones movie.
And also your other favorite Indiana Jones movie. But yeah, that's gonna be fun to talk about. Yeah. Roll,
Andrew Griffith.
Andrew Griffith.
Good night, you stupid idiot. Good night, you miserable slob.